I just want to thank everyone for being here. This is part of our series that we're calling You Are the Union. And so the first thing I want to do is introduce the faces on your screen. My name is Amir Talai. I'm a SAG-AFTRA board member in Los Angeles. Christine Bruno, say hi Christine, is an actor, director, and disability inclusion consultant. She's a SAG-AFTRA board member in New York, and she's chair of the New York Performers with Disabilities Committee. Anita Hollander, say hi Anita, is
Hello.
a SAG-AFTRA board member in New York and chair of the National Performers with Disabilities Committee. Diana and Elizabeth are our ASL interpreters. And you guys might know that, that elected SAG-AFTRA leaders are volunteer positions, but I just want to give a huge special thanks to Diana and Elizabeth for donating their time today. They don't serve the members. They're here completely just to be awesome people. Not that Anita and Christine aren't awesome as well, but all right. So this is something that some of us have wanted to do going back a few years, which is to get elected leaders in the room with other members to sort of bridge the gap a little bit, right? There's this feeling that there's the union and then there's members. And it's really, really important to remember that you are the union, okay? The union is not a corporation like Disney or Walmart. It's us, it's you and me. And if you wanna change things at the union, you have the power to get involved, right? Whether it's volunteering at the union, giving feedback to staff and leaders, or just getting more informed about it, right? Come to meetings, whatever, and then advocating for your fellow members out in the world, right? So today, our objective is twofold, and I really hope it works. One is to give our members with disabilities the opportunity to directly ask questions of our leaders and offer feedback as to what else they'd like to see the union do. And then also to give members without disabilities some knowledge, right, that can help them better advocate for and include their fellow members. I know that there's various elected leaders on the video right now, or if not right now, watching later. So the stuff we talk about is going to help people like me, right? I am not a performer with a disability, but it will help me be a better advocate for you as a board member. And look, there's also actors who are watching right now who are also directors, who are also writers, who are also producers, right? So it's useful for all of us to be able to listen and learn. So now I want to be clear about something. This is important. Anita and Christine and I are not here in an official capacity, okay? Once the union has money flowing in like before, I would love to have stuff like this regularly go through official channels. But for right now, it's just us doing it, right? We've been elected to various positions, but we don't have the authority to speak on behalf of the union, right? We're here as ourselves. So we might not always have answers to your questions, but if we don't, we'll help you look for the answers. We might not have the ability to act immediately on any ideas you have, but like I said, your feedback is what helps us become better leaders, better able to represent you. And then the good news is, since we're not here in any official capacity, we can actually hopefully be a little more candid about our opinions, notwithstanding any confidential matters that we can't comment on. So here's how it's going to work. I just want to set a rough agenda so you know what to expect. If you have a question that you want to ask us or a comment about something that you would like to see changed or implemented, go ahead and put it in the chat box, either in Zoom or on YouTube. And then Jen Levin, an LA delegate, which huge thanks to Jen Levin because she's doing almost everything behind the scenes here. But Jen Levin will get your questions to me to read. If you want to ask your question on video, let Jen know in the chat, and then you just have to be on Zoom, right? If you want to sign your question, then you can also do that too. Our interpreters can interpret for you, all right? So if you want to be on Zoom and you're on YouTube right now, the Zoom link is in the description. feel free to ask us anything, right? It can be union related, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And I want everyone to know that we're recording this and we're posting it later. So if you don't want to have your question asked publicly, feel free to just say that on Zoom, okay? And I'll keep that sort of private. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go over something that that Christine sent me. And I'd like to just chat about that for a minute before we get into everyone's questions. So Christine, you told me that disabled people make up almost 1/4 of the country's population. So an estimated 61 million people. Now that blew my mind, but the first question I had was, does that include, and forgive me if I'm using the wrong language here, but I've heard the term invisible disabilities. So, okay.
Yeah.
And does an invisible disability, does that include something like autism and Asperger's? And what about stuff like, I know that Lena Dunham has talked publicly about how she has debilitating endometriosis, which sort of knocks her out for like a week and basically makes her sort of unable to get out of bed. Is that included as a disability as well in those 1/4 of people?
I think those figures are federal figures, and so anything that is included in the federal list of disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act would be included. So no, I think the actual definition of disability as it exists in the ADA, and Anita, correct me if I'm mischaracterizing it, is anything that substantially limits one or more quote unquote life functions, right? Okay. So disability under the ADA is stuff like diabetes, cancer, HIV, those types of things. So I think probably endometriosis, you could make an argument for it, I guess, when you're having a flare-up, but I don't know if it would be considered a disability diagnosis under the ADA.
Okay.
That I'm not sure of.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that either.
Okay. Point is, there's a lot more people than that have a disability that many people might not realize, right?
Right.
So the other thing you told me is that disabled performers are the most underrepresented community in the industry. And the reason for that is that while disabled people make up 1/4 of the country's population, fewer than 2% of all characters on TV are characters with disabilities. So that's just a massive underrepresentation. And what is hard to grasp, hard to swallow, is that 95% of that 2% of characters that are disabled are played by non-disabled performers.
Correct.
So if you're a disabled performer, the point is here that not only are there very few roles that they will allow you to play, but the roles that you were potentially up for, you're up against a whole bunch of non-disabled actors who probably, because of the virtue of their privilege, have better resumes, have more extensive reels. So it makes it harder and harder for you to build up your credits. Is that right?
Yes.
The point that you're making is correct. And there's also just an addendum to that, is that those are not the only roles that we audition for. In other words, it is thought widely that those are the only roles that we're even capable of playing, but that is not the case. One of our struggles between playing disabled roles is playing any kind of role that's non-specific, that's not necessarily specifically disabled. And I've been fortunate to and I know Christine has, to have most of those roles on her resumes that are not specifically disabled specific. But what you are saying is correct, that those roles that are specifically the disability that we are the hardest roles sometimes that we can't even get seen for.
Yeah.
Much.
Yeah. I mean, the ultimate goal is for the playing field to be leveled so that everybody is considered for every role, regardless of disability or, right? So that's, I mean, and that goes without saying. I know, Amir, when we had our initial conversation, I said to you that most of the issues that all underrepresented communities face in our industry are also faced by the disability community. We have other things that are specific to our community, but 90% of what we deal with is the same thing that actors of color deal with and trans actors deal with, right? It's those same issues of underrepresentation, of myths and assumptions about what we are and who we're capable of, and people thinking that it's acting. It's called acting, so why can't I just play a trans character? It's called this, why can't I just play a character who uses a wheelchair? Forgetting that these communities that we come from are lived experiences.
Yeah, one of the things you told me
Yeah.
that really stuck with me is having a disability is not a skill. It's not a trick, right?
Right.
It's a life experience. And so, I mean, I think we all know this, and it says a lot cynically that the easiest way to get an Oscar or an Emmy is to play a disability, which I don't think people understand how offensive that is.
No, I don't think they do either, which is one of the reasons why we're so glad to be having this conversation, because very often we're talking to people I always use this terminology, we're preaching to the converted. We're talking to people who already belong to our community or who already feel similarly to the way we do. So it's great to be talking to the larger membership.
I remember when you and I first talked, Christine, I said point blank, I feel pretty ignorant about your experience. Is it even appropriate for me to moderate this conversation, right? And you said, yeah, because people with disabilities have been having this conversation, right? It's for people like me to catch the hell up, right? To get educated, to be inclusive, to be intersectional in our work here. Let me see. So one of the things that you had said is to promote the principle of nothing without us, right?
Mm-hmm.
The disabled members should have a seat at every table. Tell me more about that. What do you mean by nothing without us?
Sure. So, there was a school of thought in the 80s. The term "nothing about us without us" was coined actually by two South African disabled activists, saying that any conversation that has to do with disabled people or disability, that there should be disabled people in the room contributing to the conversation, right? So yes, that's great and it's true. We have expanded that, and I'll give credit to our great friend Lawrence Carter Long, who is an amazing public media specialist, disabled, giant in media. They and Jim Lebrecht, the director of Crip Camp, who is disabled, who's a wheelchair user, they came up with the term "nothing without us," which means we should have a seat at every table, regardless of whether or not the conversation has to do with disability or not. Again, tying it back to what I just said about everyone should have a seat at every table. So folks of color should have a seat at every table. Trans folks should have a seat at every table. It shouldn't matter whether the subject matter has to do with the community from which we come, because people are people, right?
Yeah.
And if we're representing 1 out of every 4 people on the planet, then we should definitely be represented in every situation.
Yeah.
And also the fun fact, and I always like to, stealing Lawrence's expression again, disability is the only club anybody can join at any time. So it kind of behooves people to have one of us at the table.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Great. Okay. Well, let's get into questions.
Sure.
I don't know if Jen has, okay, great. So Joy is a casting director for live theater. And she'd like to know, what are the best practices for deaf performers? I assume you mean to accommodate deaf performers as a casting director, and for neurodiverse performers for online auditions. Yeah, obviously, this is a great question for the moment, right? If you're auditioning deaf performers, neurodiverse performers over, online, what do you think is the best way to do that?
Hi, Joy. First of all, it's good to see you. We miss you in New York. I can't see you, but I know it's you because I saw your little thumbnail headshot. um, that's a great question. It's interesting in terms of deaf performers. I was doing a self-tape workshop with my colleague Marilee Talkington a couple of weeks ago, and a deaf performer asked us about what's the best way to do a Zoom self-tape or a Zoom audition, because people are now saying, if you don't live with someone, you should always have a reader. But if you don't have an actual human being in the room with you, you could have your reader over the phone or through another computer or some other, iPad. And he said, well, my readers are, use ASL. So if I don't have that person there with me, it looks like I'm communicating with myself, right? So, which I thought was, a great point. And so, I asked another deaf member, and one of the other deaf members said the way that he does it is that he has the ASL, he does his self-tapes through Zoom, and so that the ASL interpreter is in the corner in a little thumbnail, so it's clear that they are communicating with someone, that they are actually playing the scene that was given to them, right? So,
Oh, great. So basically, you would self-tape your Zoom conversation.
correct.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. And then
Yeah.
send that off. Yeah, that's great. And
Sorry, guys.
no worries.
Technology. Hang on. I'm so sorry. I can't figure out how to get it out of here. Oh, darn. Oh, my goodness.
All right.
I was going to add that in the case of a callback on Zoom where you have the casting director there, because when you have an audition in the room, it is up to the casting director to have an ASL interpreter. We haven't really, this is so new. The territory is so new to be doing this sort of thing on Zoom that I believe that it is the responsibility of a casting director to have an interpreter for a live Zoom callback, which is
For sure.
now more than I think it was before. A callback wouldn't usually be done that way. So in the case of that, it would be the casting director's responsibility to have the ASL interpreter to interpret and voice for, to interpret back and forth for that situation.
And if you're doing a self-tape, and you were to self-tape your Zoom with someone to converse with, would you then, as a casting director, be expecting the actor to pay for that other person? See, my feeling is, I think that you would treat them just like you would any reader, right? So like when I have to do a self-tape, I'm not paying my wife to read with me. And if I don't live with anyone, I'm not, if I find a friend to like Zoom with me, I'm not paying him. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a tough thing, but I actually think that actors are going to be okay with that, right? That like, look, if I have to find someone else to read with, we're all, buddies, right? We all have buddies and it's, we pay, we just keep paying it back to each other. Don't you think?
Yeah, it's this is a really sticky thing. I'm glad we're talking about it because it doesn't come up a lot. like, yes, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely yes, but. Like, first, I will say that the disabled actors are incredibly adaptable, and we have a lot of ingenuity because we have to, right? We just have to, because we live in a world that was not built for us and is often hostile to us, intentionally or not. And that definitely applies to our industry, right? And then some. Heaps of, ableism and hostility, whether it's intentional or not. So while we are happy to be adaptable, there are certain things that are expected of us that shouldn't be. And like Anita said, if we were in the room, if we were invited to come audition, there would be an interpreter provided by that casting director. So in this time, I think that's a sticky issue, and I kind of see it as a need for advocacy on both the casting director's part and also the actor's part. Like, the actors should never be afraid to ask for what they need. And then they should enter into a dialogue. The casting director should be open enough to enter into a dialogue with that person.
Yeah.
And the agent can be involved as well.
Yeah, if one has an agent, that's definitely a time to get your agent or manager involved. And what was the second part of neurodiverse community? Yeah, I mean, to me, that is, and I don't come from this community, and there might actually be some folks on in this conversation who can weigh in on this, but I would think the neurodiverse community, my thing is, I always say, like, ask. As a casting director, like, ask someone. First of all, if the person self-identifies as neurodiverse, then ask, is there anything that we can do to make your audition experience more comfortable, more accessible, more accommodating? And generally, just the fact of asking, the person will tell you what they need. Right.
And Joy, I want to thank you for even asking the question, because I think that a great person who would have more answers than this is Gail Williamson at KMR, associate our agent, and I'm going to give those questions to her to see if there's anything we missed, and try to get back to you on that, because that's not just a question for you. That's a question that's going to be important to all casting directors. Russell Boast has also been incredibly helpful to us. I mean, Christine has worked closely with him at the CSA. He might also have more advice on that. We've dealt more with deaf actors auditioning than we have specifics on neurodiverse at this point. But another actor, Mickey Rowe, might also have some information on that too. So I appreciate those questions. And as Amir said, that we may not have the answers right here at our fingertips, but having the question asked means we can put that on the agenda. And as the national chair, I'm constantly, anything I hear something that I go, uh-oh, I should have had an answer for that, it goes on the agenda for our next PWD committee meeting, a national.
Yeah.
And then we put it all together and try to give it back. But knowing that you're even interested enough to ask both those questions is really valuable for us. So thank you.
Very valuable. Yeah.
And by the way, Anita and Christine, all of the questions that come through are being put into a Google Doc that I'm going to share with you at the end.
That's excellent, because
that's fabulous.
Believe me when I say I take all questions seriously, both Christine and I, and they are seriously, they're brought up, and change does happen through our committees, because we don't really let go of things easily, do we, Christine?
No, we don't. Well, we can't afford to, I mean,
it all. It may take time, but we get try to get.
For instance, one of the recent victories we had was, we've been trying for years, and I know this is a problem for a lot of members, not just for blind low vision members, but inaccessible sides. So for those members who don't know, PDFs are not accessible to many blind and low vision actors because screen readers can't read PDFs, which are most often presented as images, right? So when you get an audition and you can't access it, so most blind low vision folks spend hours and hours trying to work with the text to enlarge it if they are low vision, or figure out a way to make it accessible to them if they're blind. And so then that's valuable time that cuts into your preparation time, which is what you should be concentrating on. So something came up recently that sides weren't accessible for an open call during this time, and somebody contacted me. So I contacted someone in my network, and that person happened to be a member of CSA and is on the diversity and inclusion committee at CSA, and they brought it up. And now they said anyone who's blind or low vision and needs an accessible side when an audition comes up, just to contact the casting director and request an accessible side, and then they will be accommodated. So
can I ask you that feels like the actor then needs to out themselves as a blind or low vision performer, and is there an easier way so that they don't need to do that? Is there a way for casting directors to as just a matter of course always put out a PDF and a I don't know what?
Here's the thing. Yes, there is, but they won't. And this is why. And I can understand, I can see from both sides, but it's sort of confidentiality. A lot of production companies don't want to put out something that's editable, something that can, that's why they don't do it, because PDFs are often watermarked and they're proprietary, and so that's been the pushback. Anita, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, this is probably not going to be a popular thing to say, but we would prefer that people do self-identify, because the more, and here's the reason why, and probably the people on this Zoom probably know this already, but those who don't, the more we self-identify, the better our case is when we go to the AMPTP to fight for something to be put in our contract, when we go to negotiate a contract to make sure that there is accessible audition material or any of the things that we need. If people don't identify, we have often gotten the disturbing response from one particular union that says, well, there's only this many of you. So really, honestly, we can't really throw a lot of money and attention to it. And I have been in contract negotiations where famous actors, very celebrity, high-paid actors have sat at the table with me and said, Anita, listen, this is just not important enough to be in a contract when there's only 2 of you, or something like that. This is why it's so important. Amir, I'm going to say thank you 3,000 times, because this is why it's so important for someone like Amir to do this. I just met him at convention last year. It's like, I'm so excited. But anyway, had to throw that in there.
It's such a catch-22, isn't it? Because
Yes.
because there's value in like passing. You know what I mean? Which like I can speak to as a Middle Eastern actor. Definitely, like for Middle Eastern actors, we toe this line because a lot of us can pass for white. And so there's value in that, right? If you can pass for white, it opens up the opportunities to you, right? And there's a lot of Middle Eastern guys that are like, oh no, I'm half or whatever. And I imagine that's the case with performers with disabilities as well, yeah?
Surely. I have passed for a 2-legged actor several times and actually gotten the role, went on, and in rehearsal took off my leg and people went, oh my God, we didn't know, but would I have been taken seriously? I don't know. I mean, I do understand that. I really do. It's really difficult. But at the same time, without the self-identification, we lose our clout. We lose our evidence. We lose our,
it's visibility, right? It's just about visibility, period. Right?
Visibility.
And yet it is personal choice. right?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't mandate somebody.
No, we cannot
Like,
mandate.
I don't, unlike Anita, I have no choice but to self-identify because my mobility disability is evident. So it's
Right.
not ever been a conversation that I've ever had to have with myself.
Right.
And you know, since this is a loose conversation, the truth is, you know, I know that um, it has not been good for my career. The fact that I'm not able to quote unquote pass. I know that. You
I
know?
will say on the positive side, the last TV gig I got, I went in on one leg for the audition, and I got the audition, I got the role, and then they wanted it on one leg. So that's what we're fighting for, is that you can go in the way you are with the disability, and it's not having to hide anything, and get the job anyway. I mean, that's the progress that we've been slowly making in television, and we have been making in theater. I mean, I'm talking about incremental, but we definitely have improved. I keep a watchdog list, and we have improved certain numbers. But in film, it's been just impossible, and they keep doing it. They keep doing the kind of casting that shows that the ignorance continues, and it's perpetuated that we shouldn't even get into the audition room. And so much so that in the most recent problem out there, a film called Come As You Are, where I would have thought by now, after Peanut Butter Falcon and other films, I would have thought by now that a film director would understand, especially because the original film that was made of that name was made in Europe with disabled actors. I mean,
And just to be clear, Come As You Are is a film that was released this year. It features 3 characters who are disabled, all played by, right, the lead characters,
the
right?
lead actors,
Yeah.
main
And they're none of them are played by performers with disabilities. Is that
and
right?
when the director was approached, his answer was, well, you could go that direction, but you know, we didn't have a lot of time, and a search, that kind of search would take an awful lot of time. We had to decide whether we would make the movie or not. And this is not unusual. This is not an unusual response. This is the norm.
I mean,
And also
I think that's.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please, Christine. Go
I was
ahead.
going to say it's a ridiculous response because clearly that filmmaker has not been paying attention, because there are lots of us around, and while we are a large community, we are we all know each other, and word gets out really fast. Like, I, as a disability inclusion consultant, have and maintain a database of more than 500 disabled actors in the country. And so it would have taken me literally 2 minutes to refer. If a handful, I could think of at least 20 off the top of my head right now that I could have referred to that person if that filmmaker had contacted me. It would have taken
500
5 minutes.
Casting Society of America has 500 on tape, 500 performers with disabilities on tape at their disposal as well.
What I'm always struck by is that the language they use is the same exact language they use for performers of color, for trans and non-binary performers. They're like, look, would have been nice, but like, where do you find those people? You know?
This is why we say we relate to all groups, just like this.
Yeah.
First of all,
okay, let's
in those groups. Anyway.
Let's get to some more questions here. Donna Russo makes a great point that that a lot of times performers with disabilities are not included when having discussions about diversity, which of course they should be, right? Makes perfect sense.
Right. Hi, Donna.
Andrea Jennings wants to talk about the inclusion and equity rider that's been going around Hollywood a lot. Does it mention performers with disabilities, and is the performers with disabilities community or anyone encouraging A-list actors to use an inclusion rider that includes performers with disabilities. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know if the language includes disability. I do know that at the high profile actors are being encouraged to include it in their contracts and to include disabled performers in that language. I'm thinking of when Frances McDormand mentioned it when she won the Oscar. She specifically mentioned it, and I remember there being a storm of folks that were like, "Don't forget disability," and and some high profile folks signed on to that effort. I don't know where it's gone or if it's gone anywhere, though, I will say.
Okay. Oh, we have our first video question. So Dominique Kang, I'm going to put you on video in 1 second. So let me see. Where's Dominique? Oh, here she is. Okay. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I'm going to ask to start video. Did you unmute yourself? Oh, wait, let me.
I think I see her.
Hi, can you hear
There she
me?
is. Yes, can hear you just great. Go right ahead, Dominique.
Oh, great. My question is, the only access I have is somewhere like at this access and LA network and social media. I mean, they help, but is there any way we can set up some kind of access pipeline, like not having 500, website to go to, like work it out somehow with the SAG to set up specifically. I know you're not supposed to demand or anything you can't make somebody hire you just because you have disability or you have, diversity issues, but is there some kind of pipeline we can use to set up one database where the producers or casting directors just can go to without having to that's what I feel like one of the barriers is. Where do I go to make connections? Where do I go to, and they saying the same thing to me. We don't know where to go to find these people, find these actors with the disabilities. So what can we do to make it easier for them, and also same time making it easier for us?
A great question. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll say a couple things. Dominique, you have been in my files for many years.
Yeah, I get email. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And I would love an updated headshot and resume from you.
Sure, yeah.
I will say right now we don't have one specific sort of one-stop shop, which I think is what you're asking for.
Right, something with the SAG, and but SAG actors they can find SAG actors or whatever, but I know you're based in New York, and a lot of times you send me to New York, so I don't.
I should have made clear that my database is national, and most of the databases are national. I mean, there are, I don't want to make this about my my consultancy work, but what I do is I have a database of actors, but I also do consultancy. So I work directly with industry professionals, not just with referrals. So I help with sort of the soup to nuts of everything. And so
you do get things for West Coast, not just New York.
Absolutely.
Because the only things I get is New York, and I can't submit it.
No.
Can we, I want to come back to the core of Dominique's question though. Do you think there's a place for SAG-AFTRA as a union to sort of like a database for performers with disabilities? Do you think there's a usefulness in that? And do you think there's an appetite in that? Right? My first instinct is, I don't know if there's a desire yet in the producers for that, right? I feel like there's a laziness that I don't know that they would go for it. But Christine, Anita, do you feel like that could be something that could be promoted that maybe they would then be more interested in?
Well, for the first thing is that SAG-AFTRA had I-Actor for a while.
But that's not what I was saying. I mean, I signed up with that, but it's like
no, I know. What I'm saying is I don't think that it did all such a great job in having help finding us. And Russell Bose, the president of the Casting Society of America, had the open call about 1.5 years ago to put all these people on tape, and that went out to everybody to tell them to, and they did the open call all across the country and in other countries as well, right? Is that right, Christine, I believe?
Not for PWDs, for trans actors, they did it international.
Oh, okay. So in America, they had 15 different cities, including LA, where they put people on tape. It's possible, Dominique, that you didn't see about that, but
I haven't.
That was expected to be a pipeline. The reason that the union has pushed back on this kind of thing is that they will not, that as a union, they have to represent all actors of every type. They won't specialize in any one type of actor to put them forward. This is the reason why the union.
Yeah, that's why we often get calls and emails about like, why isn't the union helping us? Why didn't the union push back on, like, for the casting for Come As You Are? I got several emails saying, can't the union get involved? The union cannot mandate who someone hires, right?
Because they represent people who were hired.
Right, because yes.
All of us.
Yeah.
So they can't
represent us, all of us.
The union members that were hired. So the union can't really, in other words, take sides, so to speak.
Right. That's the same response I got years ago. I understand that. But isn't there any way we can work with unions somewhere, somehow? Like without being,
Media Access Office was supported by the government of the state of California. And that exact thing you're talking about.
Right.
A government employment agency, which was the money was for just getting us hired. And that's when Gail Williamson she helped to get that started. And then the funding was pulled out. And then Inclusion in the Arts in New York, which was Alliance and Inclusion in the Arts, and before that, not called non-traditional casting, the money dropped out of that. And so we lost two really valuable databases, like you're saying. And Christine picked up the slack. A lot of times now, as you said, social media pages are like coming up as far as trying to help that very kind of thing. And I also keep a record of a contact list to let anybody know when something comes through me. So I have to get your information from Christine so that I can also be that. But yeah, you're right, Dominique, because the funding just went away for that very thing you're talking about, which helped us back in the 80s to get started. But
it's really hard because the union, I think what the union can do a better job at, though, I think, if I can say so, is enforcement.
Totally with you on that.
Enforcement of violations, right? And this is something that we have been talking about for ad nauseum, right? So first of all, we don't, as disabled, for those who don't know, this is getting in a little bit in the weeds, but there's something called the Casting Data Report, which is a list. Every time a show is in production, a field rep will show up on set, and there's a sheet saying how many people in this cast belong to this category. There are 4 protected classes of people in the country. So there's seniors, women, people of color, and people with disabilities. Now, the casting data report includes 3 of those categories. Which category do you think is missing off of the casting data report?
And we have been arguing about this since the
30 years. It's been 30
almost
years.
40 now. It's almost
Yeah.
40 now.
And the union has been fighting to get us on the casting data report for close to 40 years. And the AMPTP, just the lawyers, they just keep pushing back.
They say it's a legal argument because of the ADA. They actually use the ADA against this because the ADA says that that an employer can't ask if you have a disability or the nature of your disability. So they come back at us saying, report yourselves, record yourselves, do your own casting data, data report.
So that's something that we've been trying to.
But that's not, it's not ideal. It's not.
Yeah, and it's something we've been trying to find a solution for. The union and the members have been trying to find a solution for a long time.
Because
often
it accounts. Yeah. It causes accountability, and accountability is what we're trying to achieve, and that is about also enforcement. When it comes to a contract that I negotiated in 2010 to get a task force with the AMPTP, and for those who don't know what that is, it's the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. It's the Hollywood producers, basically.
Basically, it's the suits that we sit across the table from in negotiations and try to get contract,
and
living good contracts.
Studios and television have now glommed together. We're often sitting across the table from NBC Universal, ABC Disney, that sort of thing. I don't want to bore you with this, but here the thing is that we won the task force as part of a contract negotiation. And we were supposed to meet twice every year since 2010 because it has been kept in the contract. We've met 3 times in 20 years is exactly what's happened. So enforcement was the problem. So this is what we just keep hammering at.
Yeah.
And we haven't given up.
All right, a couple great comments coming up. One person said, regarding visibility, from what I've seen, producers care about value. When they see that something is a market, they are more willing to spend money in that area. Yeah, and I think that that's what comes back to the power that all of us have here, right? Is to demand that of producers, right? It's and to support the work that is done well, right? If you see a project that is cast realistically, right, or in which a person with disabilities is cast in a role that doesn't have only to do with their disability, support that project, right? And let producers understand that you want to spend your money on stuff like that, right? And then they'll start to do that a little more.
What is the buying power of 61 million people? This is what we like to hammer home with producers who talk to us about money and box office and sponsors. In some cases, we have actually discouraged sponsors from sponsoring a show.
Yeah. I mean, we had to throw another factoid at you. We've got $21 billion meaning disabled people, have $21 billion of discretionary income. And we're more likely to spend it on content that we see that's authentic.
Yeah.
And I think I said to you, Amir, when we talked, like at this point, like for years we talked about the moral imperative. It's the right thing to do to represent authentic, representation in TV and film. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And at this point, like, yes, I care about the moral imperative, but that is not the argument that I most often use. I most often use the argument that works, which is there's money to be made. There's money to be made.
Absolutely.
If you put us there, there's money to be made. You will make money because people, especially in this day and age, like people just want authenticity. People are not interested in,
It's the same. I mean, it's the same argument for making your projects diverse in other ways, right?
Yeah.
Is that people are less likely to be interested in a show that is white from top to bottom, right?
Yeah.
People are less likely to be interested in a show that is male all across the board, right?
Yeah.
Another great comment from Joy said that Ruth Madeley in Years and Years on HBO, if anyone saw that, great example of an actor being cast in a role that was not written as a person with a disability, right? Using a wheelchair was actually written into that role because Ruth was the right actor for it. So, and we need more of that for sure.
Yeah. And I'll just give a shout out to the Brits and the Australians who are doing a way better job than we do of authentic representation.
They have been for a while. Yeah.
They have been for a long time. If you just look at Years and Years, look at that entire show. Not only Ruth, but like the entire cast is like incredibly diverse. And and none of those characters. And the other thing, to jump off of what you just said, Amar, like, not only do audiences want to see authentic portrayals, they want to see well-rounded, three-dimensional portrayals. Like, okay, you could cast a South Asian dude as a bodega owner, but who wants to see that? No, people are not interested in in the South Asian dude playing the cab driver. People are smarter and more discerning, and TV, especially TV, is better now. Like, we're demanding more of our content. And in most cases, writers and showrunners are delivering better content. And so with the better content, we have to be smarter about the storytelling that we engage in.
I have to say, a lot of the questions that I'm seeing Jen send me are people sharing their experience and their opinion. And while that is useful, I would love to have some more questions. I'd love for people to say, what do I do if this? I'd love to hear people asking, what is the union doing about this? Is the union able to do that? I want to make sure that not only are we creating a space here where we can sort of come together and share information, but I want you to use Christine and Anita as a resource here, right? And as your representatives, as chairs of two different performers with disabilities committees, right? We don't always have a lot of time to sit down with people like Christine and Anita. So if there's any specific questions, I'd love to hear more of those. So Emily Page says that as a neurodivergent person, although she's not a performer, one of the most important things for her is audio-visual clarity, secure internet, and phone connections. This is having to do with, auditions and production meetings and this and that, right? She says, audiovisual noise and interference is one of the biggest obstacles I face as a neurodivergent stage manager who's often expected to do production meetings by conference call or Google Hangout. Right. And so this is something that I think we can all be a little more mindful of, right? Is that when we're having these meetings and whatnot, I mean, gosh, it totally throws me as a neurotypical person when someone is in a Zoom meeting while also like at the park and yelling at their kid, right? I can imagine for someone like Emily Page, who's neurodivergent, that it is that much more frustrating and distracting. So I think that especially now as we're all getting to be sort of more and more used to using Zoom, everyone please be mindful of that mute button, that video button, right? It's not just a little glitch. This is something that can definitely throw someone's work off, like Emily Page. So thank you so much for bringing that up. Let me see here.
Amir, I would like to say that one of the things the union does is every other year at convention, we present the American Scene Award, which on that committee, on the selection committee, which I believe both of us, Christine and I, have been on. We watch hundreds of, it's crazy. We watch a lot of television submissions.
And sorry, real quick, what is the American Scene Awards?
That's what I was
exactly?
just going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I should have said that before I got into it. It's about diversity in SAG-AFTRA productions, and we award people who have presented the American scene in a way that we want to see more of. In other words, hold up some great example, of the best practices to the rest of the industry to say this works for us. And because we have about 3 or 4 performers with disabilities on that committee, we were able to actually turn some minds around this past year. Christine, to me, I think that your influence was humongous when it came to that.
Okay. Yeah.
The show that, sorry, I'm blanking.
That ultimately won, that wasn't even in our top 20 until
exactly.
my hair was on fire.
And
it was Rami.
Rami
awarded,
because Rami showed so many sides and had a major character with a disability. And in the past, there have been shows that I've had to shout down and say to the whole committee, this is not a good representation of disability. You can't use this show. And they might say, oh, but it's such a great show and blah, 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 blah. But in some cases, it was actually wrong, just completely wrong when it came to disability. So we're there to fight for that. We also give 2 awards at the Media Access Awards every year. And those are specifically disability awareness and disability presenting disability on film and television, and so that's of all the diversity. And we've been working towards intersectionality, so that because there are people with disabilities of all, as we have mentioned, when we talk about Black Lives Matters, there are Black actors with disabilities there, and as Christine said, it is the one protected group, one
club
in the diversity range that in 1 second can be joined unexpectedly. I mean, you're not going to change color overnight. You're not going to change sex overnight. I mean, there are ways that things can change, but you could slip on a banana peel and that's it. You're part of it. So I think that in that way, the union also supports Real Abilities Film Festival and Disability Film Challenge, which is two organizations that present films with disability represented, both in front of and behind the screen, and Disability Film Challenge, where actual films are made, 5-minute films are made within the challenge by people with performers with disabilities, directors, lighting, people on the crew and in the cast. And Nick Novicki gets a lot of kudos for that, because what that is doing is it is actually forcing our way into the industry and getting, some people have gotten big jobs out of that. So just so you know that we are supporting, our committee supports these efforts and in pushing more opportunities. And the more we see these opportunities happen, the more casting directors are looking for us.
I have 2 things to say to answer your question, Amir, about what can the union do. And this is kind of a double-edged thing, because it's when I say what can the union, see, I'm going back to your thing, like we are our union, right? So there's two things that we as members can do. We as members with disabilities, but also as non-disabled members, we can show up at WNWs.
What are WNWs?
That's the wages and working conditions.
When are WNWs?
Whenever there's a contract that's coming up for like we just had, not just, like it was several months ago now that we had WNWs for this TV and theatrical contract that just got that we're talking about now, that hopefully is going to get ratified.
It's the process by which we negotiate.
It's the process by which we decide what ends up at the negotiating table across from the AMPTP, which is the producers, right? So show up at W&Ws, because one of the things, this is how Amir, I think this conversation, the idea for this conversation started, is because I was at one of Amir's webinars a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, what about how can we get better representation for performers with disabilities? And Amir said, you know, join a committee, show up for W&Ws, serve on the da-da-da. And I'm like sitting there with my phone going, yeah, I do all that, right? So I
more, please, more, please.
We show up at W&Ws every year, but there's always a small but mighty contingent of us. We need more people with and without disabilities to show up at W&Ws and say that we care about these issues and we want enforcement, we need enforcement, and we need to move these issues forward at the negotiating table. Because what ends up happening is 4 or 5 of us show up in the room, we put those proposals in writing, and they never end up at the table because there are not enough people who frankly give a crap about the issue to push it forward so that we're across the table talking to the AMPTP about it.
It feels like that's a problem all the way up and down the chain, right?
Absolutely.
It's not that people, a small contingent of performers with disabilities put it forward at the W&Ws. It has massive support, and then the president ignores it. It's that Correct. They put it forward, and then at the W&Ws, the performers without disabilities are like, yeah, I guess that's important. I don't care. Yeah. And then at the next level, right, at the plenary, when they're discussing like, okay, what was important at the W&Ws? Well, right. A couple performers with disabilities mentioned this one thing, but no one else seemed to give a shit. So they go, okay, well, I'm not going to kick that up to the negotiating committee. And so by the time we sit down at the negotiating table, we've forgotten all about performers with disabilities. So I think what I'd like to repeat of what you just said is, when you're at the W&Ws, if you're not a person with a disability, really give your voice to those performers with disabilities. Right. When they say, this is something that's important to us, even if it's not something that affects you, go, you know what? That's something that's important to me also.
That's right. That's right. We need allies.
It happened in 2010. That's how I got on the negotiating team. I stood up, I asked for I talked about something. People next to me were going, oh, well, I never thought of that. And then people next to them were like, oh, I never thought of that. And they became allies, and we had the allies so that we pushed through, and that's how we got the task force too. Now I'm seeing that the stunt performers brought an army into those WW. Yes. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Am I allowed to say that? Well, anyway.
Into the W&Ws? Yeah, I think that
they pushed through, and they've done great things. And you know what I loved about the stunt performers? They turned around and looked at me and went, but that's true of us too. We have the same safety problems you have. And that's when like this link happened, and it was like, okay, I'll support you if you support me. And it's not just PWDs. It's like, just like Amir said, oh, well, that's similar to our situation, you know, something that we said linked up to something you said. And I am so glad, Christine, that you mentioned this, because every year I beg people to be at the W&Ws. And one year, and the year that I was on the negotiating team was because I was at so many W&Ws. I just kept showing up, and more and more people kept going, who is this? And you know, and they saw me as a reasonable person who stood up on one leg and said this thing, and then they started to realize that it wasn't just us. And I also felt that way about the stunt performers who had just had too many years of things happening and they never pushed back, and they got themselves together. If we are the same, we can get more people to fight with us. Those proposals of ours that we work so hard on, a resolution, you know, we put them out there, would be supported because it looks like there's more of us there backing it.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, and that, I think that's just true of everybody. Like my MO now is all about, for the past 3 or 4 years, I've been about solidarity. I never, when I talk, I never just talk about the PWD community, ever, because none of these things exist in a vacuum. And folks with disabilities we need solidarity from the other underrepresented communities more than anything. That's like I'm convinced, not to be a doomsdayist, but I'm convinced like that's the only thing that's really going to get us over the hump and make systemic, sustainable change, is people without disabilities saying, hey, this is important to us. Our industry can only survive if we're really showing the whole of our society.
I think there's this misconception that intersectionality dilutes your advocacy, and it does the exact opposite.
Exact opposite.
Yeah.
I have heard that. I've heard that, and I'm like, no, actually, more to each group, we get bigger, we get stronger. And I honestly wonder, Amir, if that is a strategy on some people's part to divide and conquer, basically, well, because I can't tell you how many times somebody has said to me at unions saying, well, we're focusing on them right now. And and I've been at this for 40 years. I honestly have. So it's like, you have to wait your turn. And that was actually said to me, not at SAG-AFTRA, but it was another union. But it was like, we'll get to you. Just hold on. Just wait. And the thing is that the point is that we're stronger the bigger we are.
Yeah.
That we can support each other and get more in attention. And it's just often that disability just is not listed on those, and we're trying to make that happen by being, as Christine said, being a part of everyone, being a part of supporting other groups, supporting everyone. And we just it would be great if we continue to be a part of it and not dropped off the end of the sentence.
To use a hackneyed expression, but a rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Yeah.
So
I just glanced at the time. I can't believe we've been talking for over an hour. Like I feel like I could go like another 2 hours with y'all, but I really like to keep these at 90 minutes. So we're gonna go for another 20 minutes or so. I want to give first time questions a chance to go again. Joy, I see your hand raised. I don't know that I'll be able to get to you, but sit tight because it depends on how quickly we go through this. Chuck Slavin, I know Chuck's a delegate. I'm pretty sure he's a board member in New England as well. But Chuck wants to know, what can we do, I assume you mean people without disabilities, to help people with disabilities on set? Well, first of all, I think the step one, if I may, ladies, is recognize your privilege, right? Recognize that the set is made for you. And it's not made for performers with disabilities, right? And so, a lot of times, if there's going to be an actor on the set that day who is in a wheelchair, yeah, they'll make accommodations, right, for that one actor. But are they taking a sort of holistic approach? Probably not. So it's useful to sort of recognize your privilege in that. But please, ladies, what are your thoughts on that question?
Super glad you asked that question, Chuck. Number one, if you are on an inaccessible set, call it out. Call the union. Report the set. Report that the set is inaccessible. Because hardly anyone does that, including performers with disabilities. Because once you're there, and we, people often feel like, oh, if I report it, then they're going to know that it was me, and so then there's, so call it out. Call the union when you're finished for the day or whatever, because the union is only as good as the staff can only do the stuff that they're aware of. Like the staff can't be everywhere. So I would definitely say that, number one. I don't know, Anita, do you have other things off the top of your head?
I have had actually people be my ally on a set where I showed up. They wrapped me up like a mummy on Gotham, and then they brought me to the stairway I had to climb to get to the actual set. I mean, this was a classic. I was like, I'm standing at the bottom of this old staircase. I'm going, okay, you've just wrapped me. I can't even if I was not disabled, you just wrapped me up like a mummy, and now you have to get me up these stairs. So anyways, there were a few people who did call that in, as well as me. But there's one other thing, and this is, thanks Chuck for asking the question, and this is at the casting level. I tell this story a lot because one of our union members, Matt Jager, was called in to play a deaf role, was called in for an audition, and he's a delegate as well, and possibly a board member, I'm not sure, but at any rate, I love the guy because he said to the casting people, have you auditioned any deaf actors for this role? And they said, well, we don't know any. And so he gave them the names, and one of those names was Troy Kotzer, who was then called into audition and got the role. And we know that that is an incredible act of generosity on any actor's part, because how many auditions do we get? How many roles are available? You know, this sort of thing. And I mean, I posted it all over social media because it was like, this was an incredible thing. But he said, just because I can do sign language does not mean I should be playing a deaf role. And that's a way to be an ally as well. It doesn't mean you shouldn't audition. You can, he went to the audition. You can go to the audition and say, have you auditioned any disabled actors for this role? It's just a question. It's not, don't cast me for this role. It's, have you auditioned any?
But you could do that too. I mean, we're not precluding you from doing that too. If you want to go that far and just decline to audition,
and
you know,
that's not the only actor since then who has actually, there was an actress for a theater job who said, you know what, I just don't feel comfortable playing this role when I know there are actresses who really do use wheelchairs and they are wonderful actresses, and it feels wrong to me to be, I feel like I'm taking a job away from her because this is a job that, and that has changed that situation too. An actress with a wheelchair did get to do the role. I totally understand if you think that's unreasonable, but it's certainly something to think about when you get a call and you see what the breakdown of that character is.
And you know, I don't know. The way I always look at it is, yes, we understand what we're asking when we when we invite someone to take that tech, right? We totally get what we're inviting someone to do and how difficult that is and how contrary that is to our actor brains, because we're actors too. We all want to work, right? So I would say this, just know, if you choose to take a role, know what you're doing. Know that you are denying an opportunity. This goes for any, but mostly disability, because like we said, disability is still often seen as a technical skill. And in this day and age, if you're a white man, you're not going to play a black man, because we're thank God we're past that, right? In most cases. In any, yeah. So just know that if you choose to do it, that you're doing it consciously. Like I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just saying a lot of people don't realize that that's the effect. So just having the knowledge is one thing. So
I'd love to bring us back to the set real quick. What do you guys think of? You know, I think that the people on the set with the most privilege are the series regs, the guest leads, stuff like that. Do you think it's my place to approach a background performer who has a visible disability and ask them how their day is going and if the set is accessible for them? Is that a way to be an ally, or is that prying?
I personally think it's great. On FBI Most Wanted, the two leads were in this. It was a scene between me and that. I was not background in that situation, but we were able to have a conversation. We were actually able to have a really great conversation, which will take them into their next situation, and they are now much more educated. But I felt that on that set, even people doing background, I've done background in other like Law and Order types of things, and yeah, those conversations do go on, and it's perfectly, I think, appropriate. I hope I don't know if Christine agrees with me, but
I don't know. I feel of two minds about that.
Oh, okay.
I think it depends. Because
Okay.
I think if you're just going up to the person because they're a PWD and you know, I think just go up to them as a human and have a conversation, right? And
Okay.
then if that comes out in the conversation, that's great. But the other thing you could do in lieu of doing that is check in with the field rep and say, can you check in? Can you check in on, you know, make sure that you check in on everybody and make sure that they're getting what they need. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I will say, conversations with the crew and that have gone on have really, I mean, have been really interesting, because so many times a crew or a cast member will say, "My brother is an AD," and we get to talking, and then suddenly they draw attention to something like, oh, does she really have to go up those couple of steps over there? Is there another entrance? And they start to be allies because of the conversation. So I think conversations are always a good idea.
I do too. I just,
Okay.
I just, sometimes the way into the conversation,
I
think
hear you.
can be tricky.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So we've got Shay Scullin has his hand raised. So
Hi,
Shay,
Shay
I'm
Scullin.
coming to you. I'm unmuting you, and I'm asking you to start your video. Hopefully this works.
Oh, let's see.
There's your voice.
Let's see.
And there's your face.
Hey.
Shay, the more concise you can be, the better, because we do have a few questions backed up here.
All right. Well, good to see you, Amir, Anita, Christine, and Diana and Elizabeth. I don't know you, but hello to you too. So good to see you. You were talking about going to W&Ws, and then it ends there. I did have one resolution that started at W&Ws and went all the way up to convention, and then I don't know what happened after convention. I'm not on the national.
COVID happened.
Oh, well, there's that. There is really that, true. So, but I'm excited that you're doing this, and I'm hoping that there's huge changes in the industry with PWDs as well as seniors, and that we can all join together as allies and make huge differences in this. Have you noticed differences for, I know this is primarily PWD oriented. Have you noticed differences for seniors as well, since more seniors are becoming PWDs as just with life? And are they joining with the disabled community?
Great question, Shay. Thank you so much, Shay, for the question, and thank you as always for your continued service to the union. Thoughts? Are seniors and PWD sort of understanding that intersectionality, and is that improving?
I have found that it is, because when well, they join our numbers basically, and people, celebrities, known name actors, when they get injured on the set, suddenly realize that what being a performer with a disability is, even if it's temporary. But I think there was George Clooney, and there were a couple of others who woke up to that. It's a good question, Shay, and I keep telling people that as the baby boomers age, there's more PWDs. I mean, honestly. And I just wanted to throw in one quick thing. Shay as an ally is fantastic. And one thing allies can say to the question of why it's just acting, you know, you get in a wheelchair, or, you know, or you use a pair of crutches, or you have blue screen and suddenly you're an amputee, or you know, or you put a blindfold on and you learn how to be blind. I just want to say real quickly that when performers with disabilities act, they act the character. When non-performers with disabilities act, they act the disability. Watch carefully the next time you see somebody who is not disabled doing a PWD role. They are acting the disability, and they're really working hard at it, and they're getting the Oscars, the Emmys, whatever, but they're acting the disability. We act the character. We act the personality, the behavior, the thought process, whatever. I just, for allies, when they get asked that question, or that when they're in a conversation that is like leaning in that direction, it's a simple answer. So just know that.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
All right, going to my friend Katie Von Till, who is a local board member, a national as well, Katie? Yeah, okay.
No, I'm a local board member and national chair of the Commercial Performers Committee. Sorry
Great.
if you hear an echo. My housemate is also on the Zoom, PWD, by the way. She's downstairs, so sorry if there's an echo. Oh,
There is.
great. Okay, fantastic. Sorry for joining late. I want to thank you for holding this. Obviously, as living with someone PWD, this is very important. She's an actor, you know, SAG-AFTRA, and this is something that's close to my heart. I would love her to have more opportunities to work. But something happened where I was at a live event, and someone came up to me knowing about my union service and said, "Hi, I have autism, and I would like to be involved in the committee. Where should I go?" And so I went to the local board and I said, what committee is appropriate for autism, and where should I send this person? And they said the performers with disabilities. And I went back to him to relay that information, and he was a bit offended. He said, "You know, I don't think of myself as having a disability. You know, I really don't like the verbiage used for that committee." And I'm just wondering if there's any discussion that's been had about perhaps changing the nomenclature and the name of the committee to perhaps be, it somehow feels a little negative for me. Like, my roommate is deaf, but I don't think of her as disabled. She just speaks a different language than I do. So I'm just wondering what the conversation is like from PWDs, or whatever I should say now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Katie. I can tell by Anita and Christine's laugh at "has there been a conversation?" that yes, there's very much been a conversation. So what do you got, ladies?
I put it out there recently in January, and the committee, we went through many different ideas. Thank you, Katie, for the question. And the truth is that it came down at the end. The vote was to keep it because first of all, it has a history. Performers with Disabilities, the name of the committee, has a history. And again, in the idea of stronger together, little people have wanted to branch out their own committee. Deaf people have said, "We're not disabled, we want our own committee." The truth is that the union can't support a lot of little committees with a certain amount of people. They don't have the budget for it. So we all work together. And again, we work together, we get more results. And I'm very sorry that this gentleman with autism didn't like the name of the committee. I think the truth is that once on the committee, we're working for the things that would help him to get work. We're doing the work for his benefit and for others' benefit, and certainly for actors who are deaf. We've made organizational relationships with the National Association of the Deaf. We have sent our committee members to national conventions of there. We're there for all performers with disabilities. And I realize that some people don't like the word disability. Other people really hate the word handicap. Other people really hate differently abled. Other people really hate physically challenged, mentally challenged, whatever. It's true. We're going to get a million opinions. I would still like that guy, if he wants to be involved, to request to be a guest at a PWD meeting and to see what we do, because we're working for him. We're working for all of the performers with disabilities. So anyone who comes under the ADA, which is deaf, which is, and it is the Americans with Disabilities Act. So while I understand that you might feel a negative feeling about the word, but that is the word that is in the law. That's the word that is most universal right now, and we're getting results. So that's why we smiled, because we have been hearing, we hear from people, and then we put it out to the committee, and the committee comes back with, you know what, we have too much important stuff to work on right now. Changing our so-called branding or our label won't help us get further, because right now we're getting our feet wet in the or foot wet in the industry.
And I think not that. I'm sorry, Christine. Real quick. Not that the nomenclature isn't important, but you know, it's a term that some people identify with, some people don't, and the terms will change, right? Just the same way terms have changed over the years, and there may be a day where there is a push on that committee to be like, okay, it's time to change it. Enough people don't identify with it.
Yes.
But I think your point, Anita, is that right now enough people do that it's going to hold.
Yes.
Well,
and we have a vote. It wasn't just one person deciding.
yeah, and just in a more general sense, take it outside of the union, is like these conversations are being had across the board, right? So in my own practice, I have started using the term deaf and disabled, right? Because a lot of the deaf community does not identify as disabled, right? But they are disabled according to the ADA, right? So I completely get why the deaf community and the autistic community bristles at the idea of being called disabled. But sadly, disability and disabled is the best we've got for now. I mean, we've gone from, you know, crippled to handicapped to this, right? So we all in the community acknowledge that is not the ideal term, but right now it's the best we've got until we come up with something better, right?
And it is basically all actors who need some kind of adjustment when it comes to for accessibility.
Some accommodation, you mean?
Yeah, accommodation. Yeah. And I don't even see it, you know what, honestly, I don't even see it so much as needing accommodation, although that is part of it. The thing that I feel like binds our community is the gross underrepresentation in the industry that we have. That's like the thing for me.
Well, that's why we exist. That's why
some of our members need very little or no accommodation.
No, that's true.
They just self-identify as a disabled performer. And by the very nature of being a disabled performer, they have been marginalized and underrepresented.
And so that's what we have in common. Autism, physical disability, deaf, is the underrepresented.
Right. So I say to Katie's friend, I would try not to let the label of the committee dissuade you from getting involved because of the work that we do, which is about increasing representation, more and better jobs.
And I will say that there's a waiting list right now for the national committee, but local, there's a possibility. There's always a possibility.
I think they're in LA. So.
Yeah, that was probably someone in LA. Well, it says my connection's unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. We're at time, to my great dismay. Like I said, I could keep having this conversation because I just really appreciate hearing how I can be of more service to people. And I, Christine and Anita, I thank you so much for your years of service to the union and for the last 90 minutes. I want to thank Diana and Elizabeth for donating your time. incredibly generous of you. And like I said, this isn't an official union thing. Otherwise, you know, the union would have some money to pay you, but it's literally just me and Jen putting this together. And I want to make special acknowledgement of Jen, who I've forgotten to thank at the end of the last two of these live streams. She does incredible work behind the scenes that you have no freaking clue about, guys. So before we go, I just have a couple favors to ask of people. I'd love some feedback on this. You know, we just started doing this like a month ago, and we want to make it sort of as useful as possible for members. So let us know your thoughts, right? Was it too short, too long? What should our next one be focused on? If anything, maybe it shouldn't be focused. Maybe it should be just sort of like a sort of a grab bag of stuff. Is this an okay time of day, of week? Do you prefer Zoom to YouTube, or is sort of whatever? And then the other big favor that I have of everyone who's watching is please go to your social media and let them know that you just watched this, right? Let them know you just watched this unofficial live stream put on by SAG-AFTRA leaders, right? Let them know what you thought. Hopefully you found it productive, you found us engaging and receptive. But if you didn't, hey, share that too. You know, you can tag us. You can tag Unite for Strength, which is the sort of umbrella of where we're doing this. If you want, I don't care. But I just want the conversation to be had.
Uh-oh. Did we lose you? Oh no, I'm here.
That even in this time where, oh, am I gone? Okay, I'm back. Am I back? All right, I'm gonna keep talking. Hopefully you'll get me. I just want people to know that there are member leaders like Anita and Christine and I who are doing what we can to connect with and represent our fellow members, right? And again, you are the union. So if you want to get involved, hit me up on Instagram. My DMs are open. I'll see what I can do to get you more plugged in. Find Christine and Anita on social. I'm not going to get into everybody's acts because you're smart enough to find that stuff. And if you haven't done it yet, vote yes on the new contract, because there's way more reasons to vote yes than reasons to vote no. That's all I got, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the turnout. It's been great.
Well, thank you for having us, Amir, and for suggesting that we have this conversation. And I just want to give a shout out to all the members who are here. I can only see the Zoom. I don't know who's on YouTube, but thanks to all the members who are here, to all the member leaders who are here, and to the casting directors who we know care about these issues, who felt it important to be part of the conversation. Just thank you all so much.
All right.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe, everybody. Bye.